Happy Christmas and welcome to Lex Jones's Christmas Advent Calendar, Christmas Ghost Stories. I'm Paul Flewitt. You may have heard of me from writing such things as Architecture, Poor Geoffrey and Defeating the Black Worm. Today I'm going to be reading you a story, as have other people that I know, by other writers that we know. Mine is called The Happiest Man in the World by Matthew V. Brockmeyer. Now, I'm going to try something a little bit different. Normally what people do when they do these sorts of things is that they'll learn the story and they'll know where all the pauses are, where all the highlights are. I don't. I'm going to read this with you for the first time. So if I stumble over it or anything like that, forgive me. I'm also going to be looking over your shoulder because I'm reading on my screen. So without further ado, The Happiest Man in the World by Matthew V. Brockmeyer. It was supposed to be a standard drug bust. Your average pill mill situation. Corrupt croaker doctor handing out scripts of Oxycontin and Xanax for cash and favours. The sheriff's department, where I was a deputy, were to assist the DEA, which was protocol since it was originally our case, and also a courtesy since we were the ones who had alerted them into it in the first place. I was sent mostly to observe that and help catalogue and transport all the evidence, which was bound to be a huge haul. Word was there were piles of cash and pills laying all over. Stacks of pre-signed prescriptions pads waiting to be sold, boxes of files. Every item was going to have to be catalogued. The doctor was apparently using too, and the place was supposed to be a real mess. And then there was the basement. Of course we'd been warned about what might be in the basement, what horrors we might find, but it was more horrible than any of us could imagine. The basement was where the abortions were performed. You see, it was a pill mill by day and unlicensed underground abortion clinic by night. Mostly women in the third trimester with nowhere else to turn. The desperate and poverty-stricken, or very young girls hiding their predicament, scared and alone. We heard the rumours and whispers, nasty stories of hastily performed operations with dirty instruments, of how he'd give near-term women cryotech and then have them miscarry in the toilet. How he'd scoop the squirming fetuses from the dirty water and snip their spines with a scissor. I'd only been a sheriff's deputy a few months at this point. It had been a tough few years for me. After Amanda's death I'd been in a dangerously dark place, still so painful to think about, yet it's never far from my thoughts, lingering there like a festering kernel of lead in my brain, causing a gangrene of the soul. Fuck how it haunts me, that terrible head-on collision with that damn drunk asshole. 3 previous DUIs on his record. If the crash hadn't killed him, I swear to God I would have found him and done the job myself. On that horrible, horrible winter night, leaving me a widower at 32. The doctors all agreed it was a miracle I'd lived. I can remember lying there in the hospital, surrounded by ticking machines, tubes and wires running everywhere, my body wrapped in bandages and held fast by armatures, lost in a morphine drip. I just kept thinking, why? Why spare me? Why couldn't I have been killed too? The shit I'd been through as a soldier, the chances I'd taken, walking through minefields and facing sniper fire in godforsaken deserts, only to come home and have my wife and unborn son taken from me by something as mundane as a car accident. I didn't want to live without her, and for a while I seriously contemplated ways to remedy that situation. Going back to the house was hell, all the pictures of Amanda and I together, so many of her pregnant and showing off her bulging belly. I couldn't stand to look at them, and I couldn't bear to take them down either, to touch them. I'd been in the heart of battle, and had seen unimaginable horrible things, but nothing was worse than staring at a picture of Amanda with her swollen belly, me beside her, but not me, a former me, the me I used to be. I'd avoid them when I could, but if one caught my gaze I'd find myself staring for hours, imagining those wonderful times, reverie and nostalgia like a physical weight atop me, like one of those lead-filled blankets they drape over you during an x-ray. Our golden retriever Daisy, named by Amanda because her golden coat reminded her of the centre of that simple yet lovely flower, was some consolation, her warm, kind eyes so obviously thrilled to see me, tail thudding against the floor in such a happy beat. But even she could be difficult to look at times. So filled with memories she was. It was hard to see her and not think of Amanda. About a month after I got out of the hospital, my uncle won his bid for sheriff. Won in a landslide, actually. The last guy had been wrapped up in some scandalous shit. Uncle Ross took pity on me, took me on as a full-time deputy. Not that I wasn't qualified, I was more than qualified. Former first-class officer to combat veteran, having served with Fallujah and Kabul. But pity on me that it was no secret I'd suffered a long series of trauma and tragedy, both on the battlefield and off, and bore the effects. You hear it called the 100-yard stare. Shit, I had that long before losing Amanda. My stare had gone infinite. It was like I was trying to see between things and beyond things. Part of me trained to be aware of everything at once. Part of me desperate to retreat to nothingness and give it all up. A conflict of will I carried burden-like on my shoulders and in my hard gaze. But I digress, don't I? It's so easy for me to get lost in the past. My memories are like some intricate, horrible maze. Let me get back to the bust. His name was Dr. Fozzie L. West. Late 60s, white-haired, bone-thin. In the hours before the raid, sipping coffee with the DEA at the sheriff's office, we'd each been given a printout with his picture and a brief description. He looked like someone from a different time, a previous century. The 1920s maybe, with his tweed suit and long grim face like H.P. Lovecraft or Albert Fish. It was snowing when we converged on the clinic. A shabby building in a shitty part of town, surrounded by cheap motels, liquor stores and check cashing joints. A crudely painted pain management centre sign hung above the door. We quickly poured out, stomping across the fresh snow, and swarmed the place. The DEA barging in first, guns drawn and us tailing behind. We burst into a little ante-room where Christmas music was playing, Jingle Bell Rock. A startled secretary stared at us, stunned. A couple of dirty, junky-looking types sat in the corner by a small plastic Christmas tree, hooded sweatshirts and hooded eyes, obviously waiting for a fix. The place was filthy and reeked of cat shit and swampy fetid odour coming from a huge fish tank, half filled with green water and swarming with turtles. A DEA agent kicked open an office door and there was the doctor, trying to worm his way out of a small window, squirming, legs furiously kicking insect-like. An agent ordered him to freeze and he slipped down to the ground and turned. There was a pistol in his hand. Before anyone had a chance to scream or holler a warning, he had the barrel of that gun up against his temple and was squeezing the trigger. The gunshot rang out like an explosion in that cramped office. He fell to the floor and the blood made an awful sluicing sound as it squirted up out of his head, splashing the walls. Pandemonium broke out. The secretary was screaming hysterically, the junkies running to the door. There were cries to call an ambulance, agents and sheriff's deputies racing about frantically. I was oddly calm, enveloped in an eerie sensation of detachment and curiosity, as if I was watching the chaotic scene from a distance. Time stretched and slowed, the hurried motions of the people around me playing out frame by frame as a high-pitched ringing filled my head, and I found myself wandering away from the madness of the front rooms and down a long corridor. A rangy tabby cat mewled up at me as I slipped down the hall, an otherworldly push leading me into the depths of the clinic. It was a confusing maze of passageways and rooms, medical waste bags strewn everywhere, flies swarming and buzzing over puddles of brown liquid on the floor, splatters on the wall, random boxes filled with cat shit and shredded paper. I came to a big industrial refrigerator, opened it and peered inside. More medical waste bags, an apple, yogurt containers, a half-eaten sandwich and several tall glass jars filled with tiny white feet floating in a milky liquid. Yes, feet. No bigger than the nub of your pinky, but perfectly formed, little ankles and toes. Dozens and dozens of them. All left. It was so surreal and disgusting. I gagged but still felt this desire to keep moving and explore. Onward I went, that crazy buzzing tone growing louder in my skull, past piles of trash and broken discarded medical equipment, past a doorway in a dark tiny room. A young girl lay on a gurney, groaning softly. She turned her head to me, a dazed and pleading look in her eyes. She held out a hand, but I kept walking. Finally I came to a black door adorned with a small innocuous sign, basement. I did not want to go down to that basement. The rational part of my brain was howling against it, but some strange force compelled me. Barely conscious of my own movements, in a foggy daze like a sleepwalker, that ringing in my ears rising a notch in tone, I pulled the door open and started down those dark steps and into the shadowy cavernous chamber. The muffled cries of women moaning echoed from back rooms, and a new scent hit me, both antiseptic and sour, like cleaning products and death. Drawn forward, I passed stainless steel tables where I saw unspeakable things in the pale blue scintillating fluorescent light, piles of little body parts, fetuses like miniature, pale, discarded baby dolls, dismembered and sewn back together, some missing heads, some where their arms and legs switched and backwards. It was truly awful, beyond anything I'd ever seen in war. And then I was before a small red door with an ornate brass handle. I knew I shouldn't be down there, that I could potentially be polluting or even destroying evidence, that this was more than a crime scene, it was an abomination against nature and all that was good in the world. But a compulsion I couldn't name or control drove me to try and open the door, to twist and tug on the strange knob. It was locked. The door wouldn't budge, and I actually breathed a sigh of relief, for I didn't really want to go back there at all. In fact, I wanted out of that terrible dungeon of a place, and my mind was screaming, "Get out! Get out! Get out now!" But just as I stepped back from the door, there was a creak, and I gasped, nearly choking on my own breath as the door cranked open. Out of no volition of my own, I reached out, opened the door, and found myself staring into the vastness of deep space, planets and stars, galaxies spiralling through luminous nebulas of purple and orange. I wavered under the enormity of it, remembering myself as a child beneath the gaping maw of the planetarium, staggered by the vastness, and later as a soldier staring at the infinite desert sky, the constellations scintillating and glimmering, melting together. But blinking, I realised it was just hundreds of candles. Yes, hundreds of candles in a dark room with black painted walls. I took in a deep breath of air, let it slowly out through clenched teeth, jarred by that ringing which seemed to fill my entire body now, curling my toes and straightening the tiny hairs on the back of my neck. My eyes adjusted to the dim amber light. I saw there was a star-shaped pattern painted on the floor in red, with strange writing and symbols around it, and before it an altar of sorts rose up, draped in black cloth, lit with elaborate steel candelabras. I stumbled forward, the terrible feeling of being a living marionette percolating inside me, and there, up on that black altar, lying deathly still in a pan of oily liquid, was a tiny pale fetus. Yeah, a little human baby fetus, all curled up in that iconic way, like the space baby in that movie 2001: A Space Odyssey. Some sick fuck had tattooed the little thing. Weird markings, triangles and crescent moons writing in a bizarre alphabet. I was filled with a terrible sympathy for it. Such an innocent, cute thing, misused, tortured, left dead here in this strange chamber. It was beyond sick. I thought of Amanda and the child that had swam in her, my child, and suddenly I was choked with tears. Sobbing, I stared down at it, and to my amazement it stretched its arms, tiny hands curled into perfect fists, then yawned as if waking from a nap. It turned and looked up at me. It was alive. A fucking miracle. Impulsively I reached in and scooped it up. Once in my hands it appeared bigger than it had in the pan, more like an infant than a fetus. There was a weight to it, a heftiness and heartiness. It nuzzled against my palm and let out a soft coo. My heart throbbed with heat. It was a girl, a little girl, and yes, she was much bigger than she'd looked, filling both my hands. A craziness filled my head. I don't know how else to describe it. A strange insanity, for I took her. God help me, I took her. At the time it seemed I was guided by empathy, by love. It was my desire for a family that drove me to try and save her from the media and scientists and cops and feds. But I know better now. Then it felt like destiny. I was so easily able to slip up the stairs, through those godforsaken halls and out that open door, with her cradled against my chest, hidden behind my thick sheriff's coat. No one even glanced at me. But it wasn't destiny. That thing was controlling them, just as surely it was guiding me. By the time I made it to my patrol car, the infant had tripled in size. More. I took off my parka and lay it on the passenger seat, nestled her there, wrapped her in the folds. Purple veins crisscrossed the tiny pale body, and I could see the dark fluid pulsing within them, and those weird tattoos gave off an unworldly glow. I noticed then, for the first time, that its eyes were yellow, with rectangular pupils, like a goat, its lips glistening and black. How had I not seen that before? Suddenly I didn't feel too good about this whole situation. What the fuck had I done? There was an old-fashioned bassinet in the garage, a hand-me-down from Amanda's parents, a heavy wooden thing from the 60s when they built these things to last, covered in white frills and lace. I hauled it out, Daisy at my side, panting, her kind eyes curious, and put it in the spare room that was meant to be a nursery. Placing the creature in it, it looked blasphemous there. Obscene, that tiny, ugly thing, skin like a green and yellow bruise in that cute, frilly bed made for a human baby. Daisy approached, ever curious in that canine way of hers, sniffed at it, then whined and backed away, ears flat against her head, tail curled between her legs, and again I wondered, just what have I done? A feeling of loathing settled over me, a sense of doom, the creature just staring at me, blankly, its black lips sullen, yellow eyes cold as the depths of space. For the briefest moment I was actually filled with the urge to kill it, but then something inexplicable happened. It bat its huge eyes and smiled warmly at me, cooing with laughter. My heart lifted as the infectious giggles filled me, and before I knew it I was laughing too, bending down to stroke its cheek with the pad of my finger. It gave a soft contented sigh, turned its head and grasped for my finger, kicking its pudgy little feet. It's like a drug goes off in my brain and I'm awash in some kind of opiate high, I think. I have to name this thing, this glorious creature. It's like I'm pierced with a radiant light, like a spear from a different dimension, and there's a name in my head. It comes to me. Later I'll learn what it means, but then I was ignorant. Alnilam, the brightest star in Orion's belt. The next day I called in sick to work. My uncle answered the phone. What happened to you yesterday? He asked in a gruff voice. You just disappeared. I told him that the clinic, the whole scene, just brought back so many memories of Amanda being pregnant that I had to leave. Just couldn't bear to be there. I apologised. Said my anxiety is at maximum, and my therapist says I should take time off to try to work through this. Truth was, I hadn't seen my therapist in months. Hated her smugness and condescending attitude. It made me feel weak. Take as much time as you need, he told me. She won't eat. I tried formula and milk, warmed it and tried to feed her with a bottle. She just turns a little face away. Tried spooning baby food of all types into her mouth. Vegetables, fruit, meat from jars, tubes, little pouches, homemade recipes I researched and put in a blender. She just spits it out and clamps her lips shut. In desperation I tried bits of hamburger, donuts and cake, even pizza. Nothing's worked, not even a nibble. I don't know what to do. But she's plump and healthy looking and keeps growing. No longer the size of a newborn, she's now a hefty infant. She's able to sit up, hold her head high and look around. She even squirms on her belly as if any day she'll begin to crawl. She even smells healthy, that fresh, clean, intoxicating baby smell. I keep her in a diaper, though there's really no need. She hasn't once peed or had a bowel movement, which also worries me. Christmas. I think she may be feeding on me somehow, draining me. I feel weak and listless. My hair's begun to fall out, clumps coming loose from my head in the shower and clogging the drain. My gums ache and bleed. This morning I lost a tooth, a canine on the upper right side. I could feel with my tongue that it was loose. When I jiggled it with my finger, it slipped right out of my skull, long and slender, slightly yellow and dotted in blood. I was turning it before my eyes, studying it, a weariness deep in the centre of my bones when I heard a thudding crash followed by a high-pitched yelp. How to explain the horror I saw after racing to the nursery? I don't know how. Alnilam, the baby, that thing, was out of her crib and on the floor, spilled out on her belly like a white puddle, gripping Daisy's snout in her fat little hands, pudgy legs kicking. Daisy was still but trembling slightly. She'd gone completely white, unnaturally white, as if bleached, and a strange purple mist sluiced out of her mouth and nostrils and into Alnilam's gently parted lips. The strange markings that adorned her body, those weird tattoos, glowed with a pulsating green light as she slurped the mist up, lifting her unearthly eyes to mine and grinning. I screamed, pressing my palms against the sides of my head as if my skull might crack apart if not held fast by my hands. Alnilam burped and a giggle escaped her as she tossed the dog aside. I dropped to my knees, tears welling up, and took Daisy's head in my hands. Her lips were shriveled and dry, mummified, her eyes hollow and blank. She was stiff and incredibly light, as if devoid of substance. I pulled her into my arms, rocking back and forth, clutching her to me and weeping. Alnilam lifted herself up, cocked her head, and pointed a fat finger at me. Dada, da, she said, her voice a sweet sing-song. Those words hit my heart like a wrecking ball, and everything seemed to change. Dada! Those elemental and ancient sounds. She saw me as a father, and when I looked at her, Christ, it was so easy to look beyond the preternaturally pale shade of skin, the black lips, goat's eyes, and glowing markings to see a sweet, fat-faced baby girl. A cute little thing grinning innocently, clapping her chubby hands. And how could I be upset? How could I be angry? But later, digging Daisy's grave, wearily cracking open the cold earth with a mattock, beyond the strange influence of that baby thing, I made a grim decision. I'm going to kill it. She was an abomination. Evil. She had to die. There was the last connection to my old world. To Amanda. To normality. Slipping into that dark pit, spilling soil over her emaciated and bleached form, I realised why I was chosen. It was that empty part of my heart, that place Amanda had emptied with her death, that hollowness that yearned to be a father, a husband, to have a family. That's why Alnilam had chosen me. She needed someone wounded, someone vulnerable to be a keeper, someone desperate enough for a sense of family that they'd accept a demon into their life. She was using my hurt, my festering inner wounds. She had to die. I approached the nursery slowly, my service revolver clutched in a trembling, sweaty fist, finger on the trigger. I had to be swift, without hesitation. I stepped into the room and raised the revolver, centering the sights on her. She turned her strange goat eyes to me, those black lips yawning upward into a terrible grin, and my finger froze, locked, unable to squeeze the trigger. My hand quaked and she tilted her head, commanding me. I was helpless under her complete control as she demanded I lift my arm and put the barrel of the revolver to my head, pressing the cold metal to my temple. And yes, I admit I found some peace in the thought of death, welcomed it. I shut my eyes, took a breath, and gave in to her. But she wouldn't even give me that condolence. She needed me and wouldn't let me die. Worse yet, it was then she let me know what she wanted, what she needed, what she feeds on. She had no need for flesh and blood as sustenance. No, she wanted souls. That's why she didn't want formula or baby food, dead stuff, pieces of meat and vegetable, fruit and milk. She needed something living, something with a conscience and self-awareness. She craved to devour spiritual essence and had taken mine to the brink. And Daisy had a soul, that glint of love and empathy you see in a dog's eye, and that's what Alna Lamb fed on, leaving nothing but a shriveled white shell, a worn-out body drained of life. But what was the innocence and affection of a mere dog compared to that of a human child? I found the first one standing just outside the park, staring forlornly toward the playground swings, a dripping ice cream cone in a chubby hand. She was a fat little thing in a pink sundress, with bushy blonde ponytails bobbing on either side of her head, lapping sullenly on that vanilla cone. She couldn't have been more than 4, her mother yapping away to a group of other young women in a gossip circle. Didn't even notice me take her by the hand and lead her away. We've had to stay on the move, from California to Arizona to New Mexico and now Colorado, looking for places where tourists come with their children, living in cheap hotels beside third-rate amusement parks. I'm weary of the road, but constantly moving is the key to remaining undiscovered. Jurisdiction to jurisdiction, leaving no links, nothing for law enforcement to put together. She's sick, my poor little Alna Lamb. I'm in an utter panic. She's fevered, burning up. She just lays there moaning and there's something terribly wrong with her back. Her little shoulder blades have these nasty boils on them. They started as tiny welts, but have been growing and swelling, keeping a foul-smelling green pus, and I can see a weird movement in them, the swollen thick skin fluttering, as if there's something living inside them. Can I take her to a hospital? Call a doctor? Are these options even possible given our predicament? I feel so helpless. She's all I have now. The thought of losing her is beyond soul-crushing. Wings! She has wings! This morning those nasty blisters on her back split open and out unfurled slick, slimy, beautiful black wings, all leathery and bat-like. Her fever was instantly gone and she was immediately back to her old happy self, laughing and giggling, flapping those wonderful new wings. Oh, what a relief! My soul feels as if a terrible weight has been lifted from it. Thank God my little Alna Lamb is all right. She can fly. Actually fly. It's so amazing, such an incredible sight. I brought back a toddler I found wandering by the fountain at a shopping mall, a chubby little boy in Oshkosh overalls with big blue eyes and a double chin. I led him into the room, and as soon as I shut the door behind us, she spied him from the bed, lifting her head, those beautiful yellow goat eyes studying him as she plodded around clumsily. Her pupils narrowed and those black wings fluttered to life and rose, beating softly, lifting her gracefully upwards. The little boy saw her and grinned, pointed a fat finger, mumbling nonsense, a bit of drool dropping off his bottom lip as she circled, as predatory and beautiful as the most American of bald eagles. Then, in one swift and calculated motion, with the precision of a striking snake, she swooped down, catching his surprised face in her hands. He staggered back, nearly falling, but she held him fast, pulling him toward her, sucking his spirit from out his nose and mouth in a stream of purple mist. The little boy's ruddy complexion went pale, his rolls of fat shrivelling and drying up, his wide eyes going blank and empty. Then she released her grip and he toppled gently, nothing but a little husk of a child now. Alna Lamb laughed and swept across the room as I clapped my hands and whooped for joy, tears of happiness swelling in my eyes. She's so amazing, the greatest daughter I could ever have asked for, an answer to my prayers, a Christmas miracle, and I know within my heart we have nothing but wonderful, wonderful days ahead of us. I'm just sure of it. And now, right now, I'm the happiest man in the world. And there we are. Merry Christmas.